Hi and welcome. This is Rehole Bitata from Steam Power. We are changing narratives, we're opening doors to diversity in STEM, and we are celebrating women in STEM. We're celebrating Black women in STEM this month of March. So today we have a very special guest, young mother, and let me read to you a little bit about her, but she will tell you more. She goes by the name of Coach Toni. She's a West Indian American woman who grew up in Harlem, New York. She always wanted to be a teacher. However, she never believed that math was the subject that she would teach because for most of her grade school career at the exclusive Hunter College campus schools, she failed her math classes. When a family friend offered to help, Coach Toni began to see math in a different light and also appreciated that it was a Black woman who took the lead in the discovery of her passion. So, welcome, Coach Toni. How are you this evening or this morning where you are?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for accepting our invitation. Pretty much, really appreciate it. Let's start by asking you the following. You've told us a little bit about you, and it's interesting that your journey begins kind of in the not so A grade student. So what happened? How did you end up from that place to becoming actually a math teacher? What inspired you?
Well, like you said, I was failing math in the most miserable way. Just the access of it, the way it was being taught, I really didn't understand much. And then my parents are West Indian. So the way they learned math and the way it's presented in this country is not at all the same. Mm-hmm. I know now as a math person that it is the same thing, but just said a different way. But if you're not really rooted in theory of math, it's hard for you to understand why would they approach it this way, So between my parents, struggling with identifying with certain cultures here and me going to a school where there weren't any students that looked like me largely, and just having that cultural barrier, that conversation barrier, everything. Even at that time, my accent didn't sound as polished as it does now, and my American accent. So I was getting teased for that. I was just failing in everything. I was a big reader at that time. I really didn't think math was for me. And then one of my mom's friends was over at the house, and West Indian parents love to be like, oh, she's failing everything. She's not doing good. What am I gonna do? Help me.
How old were you then? How old were you then?
I believe I was about in 4th, 5th grade. So maybe about 10, 11 years old. And she had mentioned to the friend, I don't know what I'm going to do. Her report card is looking terrible. Her marks are not great. And so the friend was like, well, I can help. I can come over and I can help. So in exchange for a ting, I don't know if you're familiar with the grapefruit soda that West Indians drink a lot. Every time this family friend came over, my mom had a ting ready for her. Mm-hmm. And she would just talk to me about math. And I mean, it was just like looking up to somebody that looked like me, that spoke like me, that understood what I didn't understand. And she understood how to explain it to me. It was just, I went to school feeling empowered, like, oh, I can do this. I saw this already. This is not hard, And so from then I started to do better in math, where I started to appreciate it more than English, because English was very subjective. I still was at home with West Indian parents who don't necessarily speak English in the same conventional manner that Americans do. And so it was becoming that my English submissions were always torn apart as like not polished enough or not this, not that. And I started to learn that with math, if you know the answer, you know the answer, right? If you got it right, nobody can say anything about you.
Versus, so what would you say, sorry to cut you, what would you say was different between the adult that step up to help and the math and the way your teacher at school was teaching you?
I will say this. I went to a school that was pretty steeped in privilege in terms of the money access they had, the teachers that they had. And what I did realize was that when you go to school like that, everybody has prerequisite knowledge. School, you don't really come into school, a school like that, without having parents that can preload you with all the greatest American classics in terms of books. You don't, you have parents who do have these backgrounds that can front load information and or supplement them. So when a teacher has 40 minutes to teach something, honestly, they're filling in information versus teaching from the ground up. And so because my family wasn't from here, they really, they did their part because I was reading at 2, but they weren't able to really front load a lot of information like others were able to receive. My parents could not afford regular tutoring and things like that. It was that teachers really lightly touched on things. And because most of the students did understand, it was like, great, time to move on, because teachers in America, unfortunately, do not have as much time to teach as they would like. So when you have a curriculum that's squeezed into a few minutes, if most of the children are getting it, why not? And then I'm pretty sure that some of my teachers probably had some cultural bias where if I wasn't receiving something the way they assumed, they would just think maybe she doesn't understand or she doesn't have the capability to understand. So I don't think me not understanding was a red flag for them to hold the class back, if that makes sense.
Well, that's very unfortunate, very unfortunate. And it was good that you had someone in your community that actually step up to fill that gap. So I know that you are a mathematician now.
Yes.
Yeah. So what do you think, or what were the attitudes that you found when you started studying your career?
Disbelief. Many times. If I used to work in a coat room through my college career. So I would just hang people's coats. Unfortunately, now that career is not even an option because of COVID. But it was very lucrative for me at the time to be able to just receive tips off of just keeping people's coats for events. And a lot of times, because my workload was so intense, I'd be in the coat room studying. So whenever somebody would come back to retrieve their coats, they would see the book I was reading. And usually the book was some ridiculous math title or some STEM related book. And they would always ask like, oh, what are you reading? What are you studying? And then when I told them, I'm in school for mathematics, they're like, oh my goodness, mathematics, or good for you, I feel like it's a mixture of, oh, I would never be able to do that, or I couldn't ever do that, or you're a female and you're Black and you're doing this, or it's so unheard of that people are just like, great, so happy to see, it's not like a normal, like, oh, that's interesting. It's like a real reaction. I've gotten so many very determined reactions from just hearing that I'm a female, I'm a Black female, and that I'm studying mathematics, and I do like it.
Interesting. And I know that when you were in primary school, you didn't receive that support. Would you say that you got more support as you progressed through the system?
Well, my parents were definitely more vocal about getting me help. So they looked to outside programs. So I did participate in the Kumon program for math. Lynn, obviously the woman I mentioned, she came over and helped. It was still a game of catch up in school. I definitely still felt like I wasn't necessarily catered to when it came to helping me. I just knew where to find what I needed at that point. The internet was becoming a thing that you use more and more often. Obviously not as much as it is now. Back then, it was just something that was just like, there's a resident computer in the corner. Feel free to check it out. I didn't have a device in my, personal hand or, but I was able to tap into the support system my parents had built for me to be able to find out how. And then along the way, there were some teachers that were genuinely interested and did care and were able to support that. I don't think the system as a whole had a real robust support system for me, but I think once I had a support system from the outside and running into those key people who really did care, it did help me go through. So yeah.
So how was the transitioning from finishing your career into a workplace? Did you receive a mentor? Did you have support then?
No. Actually, it's very scary because math education is it's very, very tragic in America, honestly. And so the first thing was that I wanted to teach inner city students. I wanted to teach students to look like me. I did not go to a school like that. And so just even trying to get a job was hard because they saw the school I went to and they said, well, how can you identify with our students? How do you know the Black and brown experience if you did not go to school with them? I said, because I'm a Black and brown child, like I still experience racism. I don't live in an affluent community. My mother heard of the opportunity for me to go to school in a different neighborhood. And I had to take a test and I managed to get in because they had me reading it too. And they did their due diligence at that time. But I still, thought I could identify. I did go to after school programs in my community. I still had friends who were Black and brown. I didn't think it was a big deal, but that was a big hindrance for me. So I wasn't able to get a job right away. When I finally did, mentoring existed, but not in the way that I would like. And the people who mentor don't exist in the classroom space. So they don't understand the trials of a teacher in the classroom. So a lot of times what they're telling me or they're advising me on is the same thing I could find in my university textbook. It's, yeah, thank you. I get it. I know, the philosophies that are behind children development. I did read Skinner and all that. That's not hard. But I really would have loved a mentor who was, a Black or brown person that has been in the classroom for years and not too far removed from the classroom to understand what kids are dealing with these days. As a math professional. And I really didn't have that. And to be honest, I still don't have that. Yeah, I don't.
That's unfortunate. That's very unfortunate. Can I just pause for 1 minute? I'm coming back 1 minute. So I got something in the fire. I need to shake the pan. Sorry.
No problem.
Oh, sorry about that. Sorry, I will edit this, don't worry.
It's okay.
All right, so next question. What is happening in your schools in terms of STEM education?
STEM education right now is unfortunate because it's not tied into real life. That I think is the biggest thing, because when you think about when a child is born, the minute they're born, we're speaking to them in English, we're talking to them. Hello, baby, this is this is that, and we don't talk to our kids in STEM. And I really believe math is a language. I don't think we speak to our kids in math, and because of that, STEM education looks like something that's very isolated in the classroom. And so while students do math on a daily basis, right? Because even if you have a sibling and, your mother hands you candy, it's like, split it, right? You're cutting it in half, you're doing a fraction right then and there. And so if they're very, 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 because you know how little kids are, right? Very determined to make sure that bar is cut directly in half because you're not getting a bigger piece than I am. They're doing math. They're executing something with precision. And because no one is really speaking on what they just did there, they feel like when they get to school and see the 1/2 and they have no idea what's going on. When they think about other fractions, right? If there's 3 siblings, cutting it into thirds, right? Because when most people, especially in America, when you ask a child what's the definition of a fraction, they don't say part of a whole, they say 1/2, right? Because that's the most famous fraction in the world, 1/2. So even when you see 1/3 or 1/4, what does that mean? But if you grew up in a family, right? And there's lots of my students, I should say, have siblings, and just the art of sharing with them means that you've encountered many fractions, right? And because we don't even use the word fraction, because we don't define it, because we don't speak about it, and that's, just due to generations and the lack of education at that point, they come to school and they're just like, what is this? Why does this matter? Why do I care? What am I looking at? I don't know this. Versus when you walk into an English class, right? And you say, hello, class, right? They know what hello and they know what class means because someone has been speaking English to them way before they got into grade school, right? So you don't have to start from the beginning of saying like pointing it. I mean, of course you're going to do that in kindergarten, but they still do come to school with a level of English that math is not afforded, unfortunately.
It's like the language is so used, so overused that it's kind of there's no space for other things. Or still, as a society, we are not blending the two. There's one that is more dominant than the other. Yeah.
Correct. So even like, for example, if I am showing my daughter a shape, right? She has her blocks with the alphabet, and just the art of saying this is a cube, right? Introducing that vocabulary is so important, right? If you ask someone to open a door, they're playing with angles. If you say open it wider, right? Or if something's supposed to fit into something, just even saying an angle, right, versus wider. Can I have a bigger angle? Right. But that vocabulary, that language isn't interchangeable for most Americans. So it becomes a strenuous process when math teachers are trying to teach concepts and introduce vocabulary and tie it into real life, which doesn't happen most times all together in a classroom.
Right. America, I find America very interesting, because even when I listen to certain YouTube channels, even the way people are speaking, it's like they're changing the grammar of things. And it was just thinking Steve Harvey that was actually joking about it, because someone said to him, look, your grammar, the way you speak is not appropriate for the TV. And then he said, what is better, you being poor, because this woman was actually had less money than him, obviously. And he actually said, look, even still with my poor grammar, I'm rich. So I don't need it. So it's like, I don't need it. So it's kind of wearing that as a badge of honor, I don't know. And it's interesting, very interesting. So if that's happening in literacy already, imagine, and then when we look at maths, people are saying, oh, I'm not good at maths already, or I'm not, and it's like a badge of honor, whatever.
Yeah.
So that attitude is a really difficult one to change.
I think the attitude stems from like American history when it comes to minorities. And I think it's unfortunate that we have this really, really ugly slave story behind it, because it has colored the way people view formal education, right? Because at the end of the day, everyone, if I ask you, right, in America at least, right, if I ask you, how are you doing? And you say, I'm doing good. Technically, that's incorrect grammar, right? You can't do good. That's not how that works. Well, you can do good, but not in that way. It's not a state of being, right? So, however, right, because that is something that's widely accepted by a non-minority community, it is not bashed upon, right? And that is something where sometimes conventions get accepted just because of where it comes from. And that leaves a bitter taste in others' mouths. And so because of that, sometimes people have the desire to rise beside and not inside. And so disowning grammar conventions due to the fact that the majority use it is something that people are, subscribing to, I should say. And so the term, I don't know if you've heard AAVE, African American Vernacular English, right? It's something that like is huge, right? And it's kind of based on the fact that English started from somewhere, right? The terms and the words and the definitions we have in the dictionary came from somebody, right? They were invented at that point. And so to devalue the way African Americans speak is not forward facing. So a lot of people now adapt this thing where, ideas can still be translated, even if it's not in correct standard. Now, the thing that's dangerous about that is because academically, we communicate in the grammar that is standard English, right? And so because no one's out there doing those translations for people, it makes education formally hard. And so in my classroom, I strive to make those translations to be able to be like, okay, the way you said it is perfectly acceptable because it's said and people understand it. That's how, talking works. That's how communication works. Someone figured out a way to communicate. It became a definition. And depending on who you are, if you're the majority at the time, it grows, right? So I'm not ever devaluing a student how they communicate. However, if you would like to perform academically, here are the conventions you need to perform in. And that's what I do in my classroom a lot. I'm always, if students say something to me, I would never discredit, but I'm also translating, right, into math, into standard American English, the way they need to be able to perform in certain settings so that they never have a disadvantage where they are, if that makes sense.
So do you think that schools are preparing children to meet the demands of the world?
American schools, no. Unfortunately, I don't. I really wish we had more of a worldview, because we don't. Americans think that they're the center of the world. And they don't have much view of other countries. They really don't understand how other countries work. Schooling systems in other countries focus way less on standardized testing and way more on just concept embracing. And schools in other countries I can name, not every country does everything the same way, but there are so many other techniques that can be picked up from the worldview that Americans don't even look at, right? Just look at the metric system. We are so stubborn. We won't even, emphasize how, there's way more ways to think of measurements, right, than just inches and feet. And then in other countries, schooling starts earlier. Do you know what I'm saying? And that also helps. And so we're just, I feel like because there's so many resources here, English is like the standard language for the world. Doing business in English is always how you can do business. I think we've gotten stuck up in the ways of how we see education, and we don't even look at other countries like Finland doing amazing things, why not? But I don't, our students get into university and they're not ready for the rigor. Honestly, they're not. And we focus so much on the age of a student when they get out of school. We focus so much on standardized testing. We focus so much on where money's coming from, where money's going, that we don't focus on teaching the whole child and value.
So now, on a different subject, what are you currently reading?
I actually just got these 2 books from my friend, so I'm going to start them, but I felt like it was appropriate to share. So this is called Push Out, The Criminalization of Black Girls in Schools. And at this point right now, there are so many schemas about what a Black girl is, who they are, what they're perceived to be, and how they should learn, that a lot of teachers are subconsciously criminalizing the actions of Black girls. And so I just started it, but I'm in it. And then this one as well, Sing a Rhythm, Dance a Blues, Education for the Liberation of Black Girls and Brown Girls. So these 2 are like my projects right now. I just left the school that I had made a really great friendship. He is big on educating Black and Brown students and what that means and really doing the work. So when I left, he was like, take these books out of my bookshelf. I want you to read them because I want you to make sure that you are also doing the work purposefully, sorry.
And what would you say to parents that see the potential in their child and they don't have the resources to support the learning outside school?
I would say to find the resources. And I don't say that harshly, but right now is like a time bigger than ever, because just having simple internet connection gives you so much, right? And that is available at a library. There are resources out there, and if you really want it bad enough, you'll find them. And there are many free ones. There are many paid ones. It just depends on what your situation is. Growing up, what was in your immediate circle was all you had, right? The world is getting flatter by the day, right? Because of the fact that we do have technology where we can connect with people anywhere at any time, doing anything. So just if that is something available to you, take that to your advantage. And I think at the very least, be very present in your child's education. Let the teacher know that you care. Make sure the teacher understands that you will be on top of things and that you will be checking in, because a lot of times teachers, especially in America, have so much on their plate due to the fact that teachers aren't respected, period. That's it's not. That teachers have a goal that is given to them by administration, and the goal is usually a percentage of students when it should be 100%, right? But because it's so crammed, and so much has to get done in such a little time, and we have the district and the board to impress versus students to just guide, you might get a number, right? This year, my number, unfortunately, is 40%, right? Which means that there are 60% of my students who, if they don't pass or don't do well, if I get my 40, I'm congratulated, which is unfortunate, right? So if you're a parent and you can't do anything more than just bug your child's teacher, please do so. Let them know that they need to be part of that percentage. Let them know that you will make noise if they do not succeed. And even though that might put negative pressure on the teacher and they may crack, that crack might start to change the narrative of why we decide that a percentage less than 100 is okay of classes or of students in a class to pass.
Thank you very much for that answer. Thank you very much. I think that's a key thing for me, especially the emphasis that we place on grades is unbelievable, and you cannot box potential. You cannot. I think is something so detrimental and so no practical. It's not practical at all. It's not practical at all, and it sends the message that you really, as a student, as a human being, is how much you can score on a test rather than what's within. And if we want the relationship, well, teachers to be respected, I think teachers need to be given a different role.
Yes, I honestly, because when someone comes up to me, I have 100 students currently, and when someone comes up to me and says at least 40% of them have to pass, right? It's as a teacher who really cares about her students' success, it hurts to hear that. And then what I realized, even just going through school, is that I understand something that was taught to me the year after it was taught to me. When I see it again, after my brain has processed, after the summer has passed, after I've grown a little bit, the understanding really is cemented, right? So for Americans to focus so much on a standardized test that happens in the middle of the school year, right? We don't even wait till June, right? Our school year goes from September to June. And the standardized test happens in April and May, right? So we haven't even learned the whole curriculum yet. If students are below grade level because of other inequities, now we're really struggling. And then we're slapping them with the standardized test and then saying like, okay, based on the numbers last year, we only need 40% for you to, have a good job. We just need to teach the whole child. We need to focus on just having them grasp concepts and teaching them organically versus like, all right, here's a number, here's this, here's that, because students are not like that.
Thank you very much, Coach Toni. Thank you very much. And people listening, especially if you are in America listening to this, I think what you shared here with us is really, really interesting, because here in the UK, things are different, but pretty much but with things in common. So thank you very much for your time. We continue celebrating Black women in STEM, and I'll see you all in the next episode.